The morning the Weaver men left for Yosemite, the sun was already high over Mariposa County, pouring thick July light across the porch where Carolyn Weaver stood barefoot, holding a camera. She clicked once. The photo would show her husband, Tom, 43, lean, sunburned, wearing the same battered ball cap he'd worn on every hike since the 90s, standing with their two boys, Nathan and Josh. Nate, 14, tall for his age, already faking a smirk like a man. Josh, 11, gangly and serious, holding a folded map like it was classified. They smiled, because they were supposed to. Then Tom said something dumb, and all three burst out laughing. Carolyn got the shot. Mid-laugh, her husband's eyes crinkled, the boys leaning in, the last photo she would ever take of them. She didn't know that yet. To her, it was just another family trip. A short backcountry loop. One night by Half Dome. Maybe two. They'd done it before. Tom was careful, methodical, a planner. He taught their sons to pack light, to respect the trail, to check their gear twice. Former Eagle Scout, worked maintenance at the county school district, the kind of guy who overlabeled things in the garage and ironed his socks. He wasn't reckless. He didn't take stupid risks. At 6:38 a.m., they pulled out of the gravel driveway in the family's faded green Outback, Nathan waving through the back window. Josh mouthing, "Bye, Mom." She waved back. It would be the last time she saw them. 2 days later, Carolyn started checking the clock. It wasn't that they were late. They weren't due back until Wednesday night. But something felt wrong. By 9 p.m., no word. She told herself maybe Tom had decided to stay an extra night. Maybe the trail was slow. Maybe they had no service. But by 10:30, she was calling his phone every 20 minutes. Straight to voicemail. At 12:42 a.m., she left a message. "Tom, please call me. Just let me know you're okay. I don't care if you stayed longer. Just say something. Please." The next morning, the ranger station at Big Oak Flat confirmed that the Weavers had signed into the trail log 3 days earlier, July 14th. They'd planned a loop route along Cloud's Rest Trail, up past Little Yosemite Valley, overnight near Half Dome, and back out by the Mist Trail. They were experienced, registered, accounted for. Except now, they were just gone. The first search began that afternoon. Helicopters swept overhead. Ground teams began walking grids. By day 2, volunteers arrived from across the county. Carolyn stayed at the ranger station, eyes locked on the trail maps. She still believed they'd just gotten lost. Or maybe Tom twisted his ankle. Or a bear had spooked them off trail. Something explainable. Something solvable. Then a search team found the camp. It was maybe 2 miles east of where Tom said they'd be. Tucked under a rocky outcrop just below the tree line. Not hidden, but not obvious either. The tent was zipped, sleeping bags still laid out. Inside, a map, 1 canteen, 3 granola wrappers, no torn fabric, no blood, no signs of a struggle. But one detail stood out. A single child's sneaker, small, red, canvas, placed gently beside a rolled-up sleeping bag. It was too deliberate, too clean, as if someone had arranged it. The name Josh was written inside the heel. That's when things shifted. The search stopped being hopeful. It became something else. Rangers combed the nearby trees for hours. Dogs sniffed the area. A thermal drone swept the valley. Nothing. No footprints, no scent trails, no clothing, gear, wrappers. Nothing beyond what was found in that tent. Carolyn sat beside the fire pit, staring at the shoe. They would never leave without it, she said. No one disagreed. That night, a ranger named Tyler Dorn found something 30 yards uphill. A tree, tall, scorched, old, with a blackened knot near its base, and just above that, drawn in ash or coal, barely visible in the fading light, a face, crude, childlike. Round eyes, no pupils, a mouth that stretched too wide. It wasn't scratched into the bark. It was smeared, drawn, almost like a warning. When Carolyn saw it the next day, she didn't cry. She just stepped back, breath catching. "I've seen that before," she said quietly. "Josh draws them in the corners of his notebooks. Always the eyes." The ranger beside her hesitated. "You sure?" She nodded. "I always told him they were too creepy. He'd say, 'They're not scary to me.'" She stepped closer, staring up at the smudged charcoal. They were just his watchers. By day 6, the media had latched on. California family vanishes in Yosemite. Search for missing father and sons enters day 6. Officials. No evidence of foul play. Yet. The headlines kept the story alive. But the facts stayed still. 3 people, 1 tent, 1 shoe. Nothing else. No ransom. No wreckage. No sign they'd ever left the trail. On the 7th day, Carolyn finally broke. Not with yelling. Not with tears. She just picked up the photo on her nightstand, the one from the morning they left, and stared at her husband's face. "He doesn't just disappear," she whispered. "Tom never just disappears. Just wondering, where are you watching from? Write it down, bellow." By the 2nd week, the numbers grew. Over 100 volunteers, park rangers, National Guard personnel, drones, horses, dogs. They combed through the back country like ants crawling over a map, square by square, elevation by elevation. Nothing. Even the weather seemed cruel. Dry heat by day, plunging cold at night. Winds that carried sound away too quickly, that made you hear things, a shout, a voice. Then silence. They found a water bottle stuck in a creek bed. Not one from the weaver's gear. A pair of deer antlers, cracked, and the edge of a sweatshirt sleeve, tangled on a bush. But not the right brand, not the right size. Tom, Nathan, and Josh had vanished without disruption, like air seeping through a crack. The first detail that made investigators pause came from a park GPS log, Tom's registered GPS transponder. A black Garmin clipped to his backpack had pinged once at 6:42 p.m. on the day they entered the park. Then, silence. No signal after that. Not off, not drained, disabled. Someone had manually shut it off, which meant someone knew how. By day 10, the theories began. Some of them came from police, some from reporters, some from online forums where people picked apart the facts, with cold fingers and too much time. Theory 1. Animal attack. A bear, maybe. A mountain lion. But that didn't explain the intact tent, the untouched food, the lack of blood or drag marks, and predators didn't turn off GPS devices. Theory 2. Accident. They slipped off a ridge, drowned in a fast-moving creek, buried under a rock fall. But rescue crews had scoured every known hazard zone within 10 miles. Nothing. Theory 3. Intentional disappearance. And this one, it stuck. "Maybe he planned it," one of the detectives said on a local news segment. "Sometimes people just walk away." The idea made its way to headlines fast. Father may have orchestrated disappearance. Thomas Weaver, hero dad or fugitive? They began picking apart his life. Yes, he was a veteran. Yes, he took medication for chronic migraines. Yes, he once got into a shouting match with a neighbor over a tree limb. It didn't matter that he loved his kids fiercely, that he'd never missed a parent-teacher meeting, that he volunteered at church every 3rd Sunday. None of that made a good story. Carolyn sat in her living room, surrounded by boxes of unopened trail mix, wondering how the man she married had become a ghost. "It's easy for them," she told a friend. "They don't have to look me in the eye when they say it. They don't see Josh's drawings taped to the fridge." She watched herself on TV that night, pale, exhausted, her voice cracking on the word never. "He would never take them away from me," she said. The reporter looked concerned, but not convinced. Then came the knife. On the 12th day of the search, a volunteer, mid-40s, ex-Army, named Travis Coulter, found it lying on a flat rock near a ravine edge, half covered by moss. Small, folding, red handle, rusted hinge. On the blade, etched into the metal, one word, Nate. Carved shallow, like by a shaking hand. A week later, the lab confirmed it was Nathan's. No blood, no fingerprints, but it changed everything. The search resumed, focused now on the area around the ravine, a place not far from where hikers had once reported strange echoes, like rocks being thrown or voices in the brush. Drones hovered, climbers descended, nothing found, except something else. On the underside of a nearby rock overhang, someone had scraped a shape into the dirt wall, a crude triangle. Inside it, a vertical line with two dots, like eyes, a symbol. The same one later found, Carolyn would say, on the back page of Josh's summer notebook. Doodles she'd dismissed as imagination. Rangers took photos, labeled it unidentified marking, possibly juvenile. But no one explained how a child would have reached that high without a ladder. By week 3, a ranger named Elaine Park brought up an old story. She'd grown up near the park. Her uncle had worked there in the 80s. "There was a family," she said, low. 87, I think. Also 3 people. They hiked a ridge trail and never came back. No media coverage, no digital record. Just a line in a yellowed logbook. Missing party, Waverly, 3, presumed lost. A child in that group, a boy, had left behind a sketch. It was vague, faded, but the words underneath were still legible. "He watches from inside the rocks." Elaine never brought it up again. The Weavers were officially declared missing, presumed dead in November of 2009. Carolyn refused to hold a memorial. She left their shoes by the front door. 3 sets, all laced. She changed nothing in the boys' rooms. Josh's nightlight still clicked on every evening at 8:30. Sometimes she sat in their closet and waited for a knock, a voice, a sound, anything. She told people she was doing better. She wasn't. But in the fall of 2012, 3 years after her family vanished, a man named Leo Harlan went hiking alone, against posted advice, along an overgrown trail northwest of Half Dome. He was an amateur photographer. He wanted shots of the sunset. He never made it back that night. But he did leave something behind. And what he found would bring everything back to the surface. It was October 14th, 2012. 3 years and 3 months since the Weavers vanished. Leo Harlan, 36, HVAC technician from Sacramento, had taken the weekend off to clear his head, as he told a coworker. He was newly divorced, prone to long drives, and known for ignoring signs that said, "Restricted access." He parked just outside a closed gate along Glacier Point Road, shouldered his pack, and hiked northwest, deeper into an area marked in ranger files as non-maintained territory. That was the last time anyone saw him. But 5 days later, a search party found his abandoned gear near a narrow ledge, backpack torn open, camera gone, boot prints scattered like he'd been running. Leo himself was found the next morning. Alive, naked, shivering, covered in mud and scratches, curled in the hollow of a dead tree, speaking only one sentence: "There's a face in the rock." At first, they thought it was trauma, exposure, psychosis, dehydration. But as he recovered in a hospital in Fresno, Leo became clearer, though no less strange. He described climbing off the main trail during sunset, looking for a good vantage point. He slipped between two jagged boulders and saw something, metal, wedged in the granite. A box. At first, he thought it was a geocache, or maybe old ranger equipment. But the way it was fixed in place, not buried, but sealed, stuck in the rock like it had always been there. It took him 15 minutes to wedge it free. He described the box as handmade, square, rusted, the kind used for storing tools. Heavy. And inside, something worse than tools. The box was eventually recovered by the National Park Service. It was lodged halfway down a slope above a ravine, almost exactly along the path the Weavers would have taken had they strayed by a mile or so. It took 2 rangers and a climbing crew to retrieve it. The box was locked, but rust had eaten the hinges away, and it broke open when they set it on the table. Inside, a folded paper, child's handwriting, a crude drawing done in marker, a charred photo, edges melted. The handwriting said, "He's making us stay here." No name, no date, just that. The drawing was simple. A child's sketch of 3 stick figures inside a triangle with a 4th shape drawn larger, looming above. No face, just eyes. Black. Empty. Carolyn was brought in to view the contents. She stared at the drawing in silence for a long time. Then she touched the corner and whispered, "Josh." She recognized the way the blue marker bled into the paper. The color combination, brown for the triangle, red for the smallest figure, matched a set of felt tips they'd bought that spring at a Rite Aid in Fresno. "It's his," she said. "He always drew triangles for houses, even tents." She paused. "But he never drew that." She tapped the shadow. The thing with no face. Forensic analysis confirmed what Carolyn already knew. The paper came from the Weaver home. Same stock, same ink, same handwriting. A school worksheet torn in half. DNA from the corner, faint skin cells, matched Josh Weaver, age 11. 3 years after he'd disappeared, still alive when he wrote it, still held somewhere. The photo was harder to make sense of. It was burned at the edges, melted from one side, like it had been held too close to a flame. But in the center, a partial image remained. A man, or the outline of one, standing in profile, wearing a dark coat. His wrists, barely visible, seemed to be bound with some kind of cord. The background, stone, the same jagged texture as the ravine walls above Yosemite Valley. The face was missing, burned away. But Carolyn stared at it for hours, and finally, in a low voice, said, "That's Tom Stantz. That's how he stands when he's tired." She wouldn't explain it more than that, just that she knew it was him. The case reopened, quietly, privately, not in the press. An FBI field agent named Daryl Trent was assigned to examine possible unlawful confinement or abduction of minors under federal jurisdiction. But off the record, he told Carolyn, "I've worked missing persons for 18 years. I've never seen evidence like this so late. Never found a message like that. Not after 3 years." He paused. This wasn't a bear, or a storm, or some guy losing it in the woods. This was something slow. Digging resumed along the ledge where Leo had found the box. They found no more containers, no bones, no clothes, but in the side of the rock face, almost hidden in a weathered crack, someone had scratched a mark. Same triangle. Same vertical line with 2 dots for eyes. It had been made with something sharp. Probably a knife. It was shallow, but deliberate, and dated, faintly. next to it. June 20th, 2011. The Weavers had disappeared 2 summers before, which meant someone had come back, or someone had stayed. Leo was interviewed again. Now, calm, stable, trying to laugh off the incident as just a stupid hike gone bad. But when asked about the face in the rock, his smile faded. "I heard. Breathing," he said. "Not mine. Not close. But steady. Like it was under me." Then he looked up and whispered, "And I swear, it said my name." Back in Mariposa, Carolyn kept the note in a frame. Not behind glass, just pressed into the frame's edge. She read it every morning. And every time she read those 5 words, "He's making us stay here," she came back to the same thought. Who was he? Not Tom. Not with that handwriting. Not with those drawings. Who was in the woods with her sons? And if they were kept somewhere, why couldn't they leave? If this story touched you, even a little, let me know in the comments. I read them all. Ellie Brooks had spent most of her career chasing ghosts. She wasn't new to cold cases. In fact, she'd built her name on them. But something about the Weaver's story, about that rusted box and a child's note in the middle of nowhere, got under her skin in a way nothing else had. It was late November, 2012. The air in Mariposa had turned brittle and dry. Fire season was over, but everything still smelled like ash. Ellie sat alone in the county records office, elbows on the desk, leafing through microfilm. The fluorescent light buzzed. The heating vent clicked. She'd gone in looking for patterns, and found silence. No official record of disappearances in that region between 1990 and 2009. Nothing, which was already strange. Yosemite saw accidents every year, slips, drownings, bear encounters. But not one missing person report in nearly 2 decades? She narrowed her search to pre-digital records. Pre-1989. That's when the noise started. June 14th, 1979. The article was brief, barely a blurb on the back page of the Mariposa Gazette. Local teen Dean Harlan, 15, presumed missing in Yosemite National Park after failing to return from a camping trip with family. Search ongoing. No follow-up, no closure, no obituary. Ellie stared at the headline. The name Harlan stuck with her. 2 hours of searching later, she found a DMV record. The boy had an older sister, now living in Redding, California. Her name, Marlene. Marlene Harlan answered the door with a cautious look. She was in her late 50s now, sharp-featured, hair clipped short and silver. Her home was modest, neat, quiet, the kind of place where the TV is kept off most of the day. She didn't ask why Ellie had come, just looked at the press badge and said, "You're here about Dean." They sat at her kitchen table. A slow drip from the sink filled the silences. Marlene lit a cigarette, took a long drag, then said, "We were camping just west of Half Dome. My brother, he was always the quiet one. Sensitive, kind, the kind of kid who'd bring home hurt animals." She tapped her ash. "He started talking about a man in the rocks." Ellie blinked. "In the rocks?" Marlene nodded. "Said the man didn't age, that he watched people from inside the stone. I thought it was just, imagination, campfire nerves. But Dean wouldn't sleep that night. He kept saying he saw him, a face watching from the cliffs." Her hand shook slightly as she lit another cigarette. "Next morning he was gone. His sleeping bag was zipped up, but he wasn't in it." Marlene's voice cracked. "They said he wandered off, maybe slipped, but he'd never go far without telling me. He was scared. That's the part no one got. He didn't run. He was taken." Ellie left with more questions than answers. That night, She returned to the Gazette's microfilm, retracing old headlines from the 60s through 80s. Her fingers turned black with ink. Then she found it. July 2nd, 1965. Family of 4 fails to return from Yosemite outing. Searchers find abandoned campsite near Liberty Cap. No signs of struggle. But something else caught her eye. A grainy black-and-white photograph printed next to the article. The family posing near a trailhead. A ranger in the background. And farther back, blurry but distinct, a lone man standing apart. Head turned slightly, facing the camera. He wore cargo pants and a long-sleeve shirt, sleeves rolled, broad-shouldered. Same build as Tom Weaver, same posture. But the photo was dated 1965. Tom wouldn't be born for another 5 years. Ellie printed the photo, took it home, scanned it, zoomed in. Her heart thudded in her throat. Not a perfect match, but the stance, the shape, even the slight angle of the jaw. It all looked too close to be coincidence. But how could it be him? Ellie began requesting access to restricted incident reports from the National Park Service. Most were denied. A few came back heavily redacted, whole pages blacked out. But there were consistencies. Each file described similar circumstances. Family groups, remote areas around Half Dome, no signs of struggle, little or no physical evidence. Searches suspended within 72 hours. Some were tagged with cryptic internal codes: V21, Delta Loss, NS Restrains. One included a field memo from 1981. It was a brief statement by a ranger named Don Kessler. Heard child screaming North Ridge, approx. 2:10 a.m., no visual. Supervisor instructed, hold position, no action. Ellie tracked down Don, now 83 and living in a care home in Visalia. He agreed to speak, under one condition, no recording. She took notes by hand. His voice was thin, but his memory sharp. That night I was alone at North Watch. Moon was bright, cold for July. Sound carried. He paused. It was a scream, not an animal, not wind, a kid, maybe 2, and I radioed it in. He stared hard at the table. My supervisor came back 10 minutes later, said it was a false reading. Wind in the trees. He looked up, eyes wet. But I heard them. Ellie wrote the first version of her article in December 2012. The title was simple: Not the First. A Pattern of Disappearances in Yosemite's Quiet Zone. It was set to publish in California Current, a mid-tier investigative outlet. But hours before it was scheduled to go live, the editor called her, "We're pulling the story." No explanation, no compromise. The editor refused to return her calls for 3 days, then finally sent a text. "It's bigger than we thought. Let it go." Ellie didn't. She published it independently. A long-form post, embedded scans, links to the records, audio clips, the 1965 photo. Within 2 weeks, it had 600,000 views. But what mattered more was what came after. An email. No subject. No body text. Just one attachment. A different scan of that same 1965 photo. But this time, cropped tighter. And circled in red. The man in the background. The figure who looked like Tom. And beneath, in all caps, a message typed in Courier font. "You're looking the wrong way." They called themselves the Backtrackers. 3 young guys with a low-budget YouTube channel and an obsession with national park disappearances. Dylan ran the camera. Chase did most of the talking. Sam, the quietest of the 3, was just along for the ride. They weren't professionals, but their channel had over 80,000 subscribers and a loyal base of true crime addicts who loved the wilderness mystery content. On March 10, 2013, they uploaded a short teaser. We're heading into a restricted section of Yosemite next week. Unexplained vanishings, no rescue records, radio silence zones. Let's find out why. The title was simple: Half Dome's Dead Zone. It was the last video they uploaded together. The trail they chose wasn't on any official map. Chase had cross-referenced older USGS overlays from the 1970s and found a footpath that curved south of the standard half-dome route, snaking toward a closed zone marked Area 4B, natural deterioration. It was bureaucratic language for, "Don't go here." But they went. They left Mariposa at 6:40 a.m., March 16th. By March 18th, they hadn't returned. The emergency call came from Dylan's father. No one answered phones, no social media activity, no GPS pings. Search crews went out. All they found was a single discarded backpack near Mirror Lake, slashed open at the top, as if someone had tried to empty it quickly. No sign of the boys. Then, late on the second day, Sam returned. He came stumbling into the ranger station in Curry Village at 5:23 a.m. on March 19th. He was barefoot, shirtless, and bleeding from one ear. His pupils were blown wide. His fingernails were black at the tips. The ranger on duty, Jason Mejia, said Sam collapsed the moment he crossed the threshold. When he came to at the hospital, he couldn't speak in full sentences, just fragments. Nonsense at first. Trees walked. My face. No clock. Then, voices were my voice. They told me to wait. His heart rate was erratic. Blood tests showed mild dehydration, but no drugs, not even weed. A psych evaluation noted acute disassociation, possible trauma-induced psychosis, and, curiously, mirror delusion. Sam repeatedly asked for Dylan and Chase. When told they hadn't been found, he covered his ears and whispered, "Don't say their names." He hears names. Ellie Brooks caught wind of it through a local EMT contact. Within days, she had the incident report, redacted but intact. She traced the backtrackers' online presence, found their last known GPS coordinates from a cached Strava account Chase had forgotten to lock down. And then, the real find. A corrupted video file uploaded, but never published. Sam had tried to schedule it before they went off-grid, but the file failed. Ellie recovered it. The footage begins with typical hiker banter. Sunlight slanting through the trees, the boys joking about ghost stories. The audio cuts in and out, likely due to signal interference. Birds chirp. Packs shift. A breeze. Then, at minute 12:47, they stop. In frame, a rockfall, fresh, blocking the trail. Someone had deliberately stacked the stones. A kind of warning, maybe. Or a line. Chase crouches down. Looks recent. Maybe some ranger stuff? Dylan. There haven't been rangers here in years. Look how overgrown this is. Sam doesn't say anything. He's looking off into the trees. The audio dips, then picks up a strange sound. A single, high-pitched whistle, like air escaping from deep underground. No one mentions it. They walk on. The video becomes increasingly disjointed. Frames freeze, skip. Time seems to distort. Sunlight changes too fast. It's still daylight, but their watches show 9:18 p.m. At one point, Chase mutters, "We're walking in circles. This tree was marked." I scratched it. He shows the bark, deep gouges from a knife. They walk for another 20 minutes. They pass the same tree again. The last leg of the footage is from Sam's chest cam. It's dark now. They've set up a tent. Voices are low, tired. Chase is whispering, "Okay, tomorrow we go back. This isn't right. Dylan hasn't said a word in 2 hours. Sam's not eating. We're done." Then, a noise. Footsteps outside. Heavy. Deliberate. The camera shifts to the tent flap. No one opens it. They don't even speak. Then a whisper. Don't look. Don't move. A shadow passes by the tent, tall, wrong somehow, as if the body was too straight, too rigid. Then silence. On the canvas, a faint scraping. Someone is writing something. The next morning, the tent is empty. Sam is alone. When Ellie interviewed Sam at the facility weeks later, he barely acknowledged her. She asked what he saw. He said only this: "I saw my own face, but it wasn't me. It was taller. It didn't blink." She pressed him about Dylan and Chase. Sam whispered, "He took their eyes so they wouldn't see him again." Ellie didn't believe him until she received the tent. After the Rangers packed up the boys' abandoned site, they logged everything and sealed it in evidence. Ellie filed a Freedom of Information request, got the inventory list. Item 14. Canvas tent with surface markings. Ellie requested it. She examined it under UV light. Across the nylon, scratched in with something jagged and sharp. "Don't look for him. He belongs here." The video was never released. Sam's parents refused further interviews. He was relocated quietly to a facility in Oregon. All online traces of the Backtrackers expedition vanished within weeks. The teaser video was pulled by YouTube for violating terms of service. Ellie kept copies. She still plays the footage sometimes, late at night, when she can't sleep. There's one frame that always freezes. A silhouette on a ridgeline, standing there, watching, never moving. It started with a slip. Literally. Kyle Brewster, 29, was an amateur climber with a knack for finding routes no one wanted. He wasn't famous, didn't post reels, didn't wear neon gear, but he was obsessed with Yosemite's geological anomalies, cracks that didn't match fault lines, dead ends that didn't appear on LiDAR maps. He spent most of his free weekends alone in the park, climbing with old gear and a notebook full of hand-drawn topographies. On July 8, 2014, just after 7:30 a.m., he parked at a trailhead used mostly by park maintenance crews. No public signage, no tourists, just dust, pine resin, and the sound of wind sliding down the rock faces. He was tracking a natural fracture line on the southern flank of Half Dome when he fell. Not far, maybe 6 feet, but enough to crack his ankle and force a decision: crawl back to the ridge or take cover. He chose cover. That's how he found the gap. The opening was so thin he nearly missed it. Only a dark vertical sliver behind a tilted slab. But the air was cooler there, and the wind made a soft exhale as it passed through. Something about it felt recent, like the rocks hadn't always been there. Kyle pulled himself in with his hands, dragging his pack. Inside, the light vanished almost instantly. His headlamp flickered. He knocked it once, and the beam steadied. The space opened up, roughly 8 feet wide, 12 feet deep, and at the far end, blackness that pulled light into itself. He paused at the threshold, heart rattling against the pain in his ankle. Then he saw it, a strip of faded nylon half buried in dust. Tent fabric. He froze. Another step, and there it was, a torn blue windbreaker with patches of mildew. The kind REI sold in the early 2000s. He crouched. The label inside read, "Property of Thomas W." He knew the name. Everyone who followed Yosemite's disappearances did. The Weaver family. Gone since 2009. Kyle reached for his phone. No signal. He turned off his light to conserve battery. Dark. Silent. Then, barely audible. Breathing. He stayed frozen for nearly 20 minutes before convincing himself it was his own breath echoing. Then he started cataloging. A sleeping bag, shredded along the seam. Scraps of energy bar wrappers, degraded but still legible. Cliff Bar, chocolate chip. And then, the camera. A black Canon PowerShot S5, the exact model listed in the original 2009 search inventory, covered in fine dust, battery compartment open, no card inside. But in the corner of the chamber, wedged in deep, Kyle saw a glint. A second card. He slid it out with a key from his pack, careful not to scratch it. It was cracked, heat-warped, corroded at the edge. Still, it was something. He limped out of the fissure before nightfall. 2 days later, Ellie Brooks met him at a cafe in Merced. He handed her the card sealed in a Ziploc bag. She didn't say much, just nodded, paid for his coffee, and left with her phone already ringing. It took 4 labs and almost a month, but one image survived. A single frame. It showed a close-up of a man's face. Thomas Weaver. His beard was patchy, his skin cracked and sunburned, his eyes wild, wide open, dilated. He looked terrified. The background was a cave wall, distinct granite lines, and behind him, just visible over his shoulder, a figure. Tall, slender, wrong, like it had been stitched from shadow. Carolyn Weaver was brought in privately to view the photo. She didn't cry. She didn't speak for nearly a minute. Then, in a voice that seemed to come from someone twice her age, she whispered, "That shirt. I gave him that shirt for Father's Day. 2008. He hated button-downs." The tears came later. But there was more. The Park Service, now under pressure, opened a previously sealed incident report from 2010. It detailed a series of unauthorized markings discovered by climbers on an outcropping 2 miles east of Half Dome. Initially dismissed as graffiti, the report included photos of the markings. One of them was a name, Josh, carved roughly, childlike. Beneath it, a series of short, frantic scratches, like fingernails. Ellie contacted the forensic analyst who reviewed the carving. He confirmed the tool marks were consistent with a child's grip and a dull object, like a tent peg or flattened spoon. Age estimate, at least 3 years old. Placement, inside a narrow crawl space, only accessible by someone small or desperate. Ellie returned to the site with Kyle in late September. This time, she didn't film, didn't tweet. They followed the exact route, flagged with orange tape by Kyle earlier in the summer. Inside the fissure, the air was stale, cold. Even with the outside temperature hovering near 80, it felt like a cellar. They didn't go deep, just far enough to see it was real, just far enough to find the second set of prints. Smaller than an adult's. Barefoot, deep in the dust, still fresh. And beside them, a single inhaler. Red plastic. Ellie didn't need to check the old case files. She already knew. Josh Weaver had asthma. Kyle left the park that day and never returned. Sold his gear. Deleted his blog. Ellie tried to keep going, tried to stay objective. But one night, while reviewing her audio notes, she paused. In a recording from inside the cave, just before she'd turned off the mic. A breath. Not hers, not Kyle's. Slow. Close. And a whisper. So faint it barely registered. Just one word. Stay. Cold, stale air. That's what greeted the team when they first lowered the stretcher into the hidden cavern on the northern slope behind Half Dome in May 2022. Alpine archaeologists had stumbled on this entrance while surveying a seasonal waterfall retreat known only in local ranger lore. Sliding a rope ladder into the drop, a trio, led by Dr. Mia Tanaka, descended into a chamber no human had seen for decades, if not centuries. The 3 skeletons were arranged neatly against the far wall. One adult male, rib cage collapsed inward, skull cracked, but positioned upright, knees drawn up. On either side, 2 smaller figures. Children, possibly brothers. Both seated in the exact mirrored posture, backs pressed to the rock, knees under chins, their long bones aligned like twin carvings. It was eerie, ritual-like, not haphazard, not accidental. Dr. Tanaka's voice hovered over the radio static. We have identifications and a timeline that challenges everything. Carolyn Weaver flew up 2 days later. When she stood before the bodies, she didn't cry. Instead, she counted. 3. 3 souls she thought lost. Confirmed. 3 remains that might bring clarity. But for the first time, clarity felt like a burden. She looked at forensic sheets spread across a tarp in the investigative tent. Tom, Nathan, Josh. DNA matches 100%. Cause of death? Likely starvation with gradual dehydration. But more astonishing, time of death estimated 6 to 9 months after disappearance, not immediately in 2009. That meant her husband and sons lived, at least for a while, before this chamber became their tomb. Carolyn gripped her knees. Hope, once extinguished, flickered again. Inside the cave, they found more. Pages of a pencil-worn notebook tucked behind a flagstone. The margin scribbles faint but legible. From the final entry, dated late December 2009. Still no sound from outside. We'll wait one more day. The boys are calm. Every word carved witness. A family not lost, but waiting. Preserving hope until hope literally faded away. Carolyn collapsed that night in a ranger station bunk, dry-eyed. She said only, they were waiting. All that time. At least, according to the cave's record. Investigators labeled the chamber Site C, a sealed pocket insulated from the park's seasonal freeze and summer sun. Soil samples showed no airflow entering, like a tomb sealed externally, intentionally, or naturally. Then came the message. On the granite wall, near Josh's small skeleton, someone had carved letters deep into the stone. Someone was here. Not written by Tom, not by any child handwriting, different strokes. Delicate etch. The D slanted. The W curved. It stared back. Insinuation that they were not alone, even in death. Still, questions thundered. If Tom was alive until winter 2009 to 2010, who brought him and his boys into this cavern? And why? Why wait? And who carved the message? Carolyn pressed Ellie to attend. Ellie Brooks sat under fluorescent lights at the county morgue, the fragmented notebook on a metal table between them both. She said, "We knew they were alive for days after. But months? That rewrites everything." Ellie examined the notebook's inkless pencil marks, her voice quiet. He recorded logic, not panic. We'll wait one more day. That's hope refusing to die. And then Ellie turned to Carolyn, eyes weighted. But message? Someone was here. That's a warning. Word of the discovery broke by midsummer 2022. Headlines exploded. Weaver family found alive in vaulted cave, 13 years later. They waited, but they couldn't leave. Public sentiment roared between empathy and horror. Carolyn issued a statement. My family should have come home. They tried. They believed they would. But someone, showed them another path. At a press conference, a pathologist explained, physiologically, the skeletons show signs of prolonged time inside. Bone tissue indicates early starvation bleeds. The adult, Tom, survived longest. The children probably sheltered in the corner, kept alive by small amounts. Carolyn inhaled sharply. They had food, water, maybe even blankets. They prepared, but prepared for what? That evening, Ellie found herself at the edge of Half Dome. No lights, no cheers or jeers, just whined-over granite and memory. No sooner had she closed her eyes than her phone buzzed. A new dossier had arrived. No sender, no header. Inside, a single photograph. Tom Weaver, taken in August 2009, 2 months into disappearance. He's holding a camera, leaning against a halved rock face. Behind him, a tall man wearing dark clothing. Face blurred, as if smeared. Posture rigid. Shoulder to shoulder, but 2 feet behind. Carolyn saw it later that night. She stared at the image until tears fell. She whispered, "It was always him." Watching. 12 months later, the Weaver's cavern is cordoned off, sealed for scientific study. Carolyn, now advocating for closure, stands outside the entrance one last time. Her voice cracks. They closed the loop. But the loop didn't start with us. Ellie's voice in the background, soft and resolute. This isn't just a family story. It's a pattern, a trauma that repeats. Someone was here. The words echo. Carolyn covers her face. And so do we. When we realize that discovering the bodies didn't end anything. It opened more questions than it answered. They reopened the Weaver case in early spring 2022, just weeks after the discovery of the bodies. It wasn't a press conference or an official bulletin that marked the shift. It was a single sentence in a regional crime report, buried 3 paragraphs deep. Investigators are reviewing older Yosemite disappearances in light of new evidence. That's all it took for Ellie Brooks to pack her bag. She'd covered unsolved disappearances before, long hours combing court records and taped-up archive boxes in dusty county offices. But this one was different. The Weaver case had haunted her for nearly a decade. She remembered the first press release, the blurry photo of the family smiling in front of their truck, Carolyn Weaver in oversized sunglasses and a windbreaker, clutching that photo like it was the last thread of a world that had vanished. Ellie never bought the official narrative. Now, the timeline didn't lie. The Weavers had survived longer than anyone thought. That cave, cold and unreachable, had preserved more than just remains. It preserved silence, and silence doesn't keep secrets without a reason. The National Archives building in Denver didn't open early. Ellie waited in her rental car, tapping her pen on a yellow legal pad. The receptionist was polite, but disinterested. Anything pre-1980 might take time. What department? Interior. And Defense, Ellie added. That turned the receptionist's head. It took 3 separate forms, a visitor badge, and a security escort to get to the boxes she wanted. Project Starling. That's what the first redacted document called it. The title was handwritten in fading ink across a declassified memo from 1952. Most of it was blacked out, but there were pieces, phrases that leapt out like whispers through static, controlled isolation test environment. Cognitive fragmentation under duress. Civilian candidates deemed ideal due to psychological naivete. Half Dome was mentioned in a footnote. Later documents described localized field operations conducted in high-altitude forested terrain. Environmental persistence model. Behavioral deviation tracking. The words sounded clinical until you remembered they were talking about human lives. One report, dated July 1953, detailed an incident involving a test group of 5 men. Their assigned task had been survival over 10 days in an undisclosed mountainous location. Radio contact was lost on day 4. No distress signals. No footprints traced beyond the initial camp perimeter. Search teams scoured the area for weeks. The bodies were never found. But in 1959, a man named Walter K. Martin, one of the missing, was picked up by police in a motel off Route 30 in Ohio. Dressed in outdated hiking gear, dehydrated, confused. When questioned, he said only one thing: I don't think I ever left. Ellie laid out the documents in her motel room like puzzle pieces. Yellow light flickered from the table lamp. Her recorder clicked on. If the Project Starling field test was indeed conducted in Yosemite, and if the location overlaps with Half Dome, she said into the mic, that changes the entire framework of the Weaver case. We are no longer looking at a tragic accident, but the ripple effects of an experiment no one was meant to survive. Her voice cracked slightly. She reached for her water. Another document detailed the use of intergenerational control subjects. Volunteers tracked through bloodlines. She reread the line 3 times. Ellie opened her laptop, searched Thomas Weaver's genealogy. His father was military. His grandfather, Robert Weaver, had served in experimental units between 1948 and 1955. There was no detailed record of his deployments, just one word stamped across the service file: classified. What if Thomas had been marked from birth? What if the place that drew him, that perfect trail for a family hike, wasn't random? She stared at her screen, hands trembling slightly. The next morning, a manila envelope was waiting at her door. No return address. Inside, one black and white photograph printed on textured fiber paper. Dated August 1965. In the foreground, a small group of hikers, perhaps a family. The edges were blurry, but the central figure stood out. Ellie held her breath. The man in the photo wore a windbreaker, cargo pants, and hiking boots. He looked just like Thomas Weaver. Not a resemblance, not a maybe, but him. Same jawline, same posture, even the same way he held the map in his hand. But the date didn't match. This was taken 44 years before he vanished. On the left edge of the frame, just barely visible, stood another man, or a shadow, rather. The figure's face was blurred, but not by motion. It looked like it had been erased, as if something had rubbed it out with precision, deliberately. No metadata, no note. Just that image. Someone wanted her to see it, but not to understand it. That night, Ellie met with an archivist who agreed to look at the materials off the record. "I've seen this once before," he said, tapping the photo. Or something close. It was tied to a different case. Utah, 1970s. A group of hikers. They came back, but one of them swore he kept seeing his double. Every night in the woods. Standing still. Ellie asked the question without knowing why. Did anyone believe him? The archivist shrugged. Long enough to get him committed. He hanged himself 3 weeks later. A long pause. "Miss Brooks, you're poking into things people have tried very hard to forget, things that were buried for a reason." Ellie looked down at the photo. "Then why send me this?" She didn't sleep much that night, kept checking the locks, kept glancing at the photo, now placed under a lamp for constant light. Her laptop blinked awake at 3:17 a.m. A file appeared on the desktop, just a text document, one sentence inside. He was never supposed to come home. She stared at it, heart pounding, and then the file disappeared. Ellie sat silently in her small home office, watching the news jump to a new missing persons case, this one devastatingly familiar. Another California family, Russell Fletcher's, 2 parents and their 2 children, vanished from a remote trailhead 6 miles north of Half Dome in June 2023. The drone footage released showed the kids walking along a rock rim. Then the drone dipped into a narrow fissure in the rock face. In the final second, just before static overtook the feed, you hear a faint whisper. "They're still here." Ellie leaned back, eyes tired and red. She shut the video mid-sentence. It felt like someone else opening a door she thought she'd closed. Carolyn Weaver had moved onto a small vineyard, west of Mariposa. The land was quiet, but not peaceful. She hadn't spoken publicly since 2022. When Ellie called her, Carolyn answered on the first ring. The static of the line seemed to carry the weight of half her life. "Another family," Ellie said gently. "Same dates, same area. Drone feed, whisper." Carolyn listened. No tears, just stillness. After a long pause, she whispered, "They want us to look again." That night, Carolyn dreamed. She was in the cavern where the Weavers had been found. Her sons sat beside her, back to back, knees folded under them. They looked calm, even peaceful. But then she saw another face in the shadows. It was not them. It was something not quite human, but it watched. Josh's voice echoed. "We weren't alone." Carolyn woke to her phone. An unlisted number. She picked up. Silence. Then faint. A child's giggle. Ellie Myers, the investigative reporter chosen by California Current to follow the Fletcher case, reached out to Ellie Brooks. Same first name. They exchanged notes and met in Fresno. No other family wanted to go public. Faye, the Fletcher mother, opted for isolation after interviews. Her big blue eyes clouded with fear. The father, Bryce, said one line, "We followed the map. Did everything right. And yet, we vanished." Drone footage and GPS pings showed they'd approached the same forbidden fissure. Their kids looked at something off-camera before the feed cut. Ellie Brooks stared at the Fletcher Trail logs. Hikers had reported strange echoes in the region. Whispers, untraceable footsteps, water pools not on the map. She felt the air constrict. This wasn't a copycat. It was a pattern. The loops were closing. A Freedom of Information request revealed records from the Park Service. A memo dated October 2022. Area surrounding Weaver Cave to be designated Research Zone 6. Access restricted. No further excavation permitted. Ellie contacted the park liaison. "Why seal it?" "Containment," came the reply. Carolyn asked what that meant. Control of misinformation. She asked if this meant there might be more beneath the rocks. No answer. Meanwhile, Ellie Brooks started confronting her own fears. She rewatched the drone feed, frame by frame. On one second frame, something white moved past the entrance, like a child dragging a blanket. She slowed it down, zoomed. It wasn't motion blur. It was deliberate. A small hand. It moved behind the cliff face, out of sight. The whisper at the end of video, 3 syllables. That voice sounded uneducated, young, Peter Pan-like, innocent, and yet loaded. "They're still here." Carolyn stood in her stable the next day, brushing a chestnut mare. Her hands shook lightly. She whispered to the animal, "I forgive him." The words felt heavy, not for Tom, but for herself. Because he did everything he could. Her reflection in the barn window showed an older woman, loss etched in her eyes, but also relief. She had finally said it out loud. That night, Ellie sat at her laptop. She tried to upload her final report on the Fletcher case. She felt the tremor of anxiety. She clicked Submit. An error message popped up. Upload failed. She tried again. But then her entire file system disappeared. Every document, every image, every note. A blank desktop remained, except one file, a text box. It read, "Half Dome never forgets." No sender, just that. The words burned. Ellie responded anyway, with silence. She shut her laptop. She looked out the window into the dark night of her yard. No moon, no birds, but wind. And perhaps, from deeper centers, the echo of someone else's waiting. This was a story about disappearances, but it wasn't about them. Not only about them. It was about what happens when we lose the truth, when silence fills the space where answers should be. That silence echoes, and sometimes it draws more inside.